Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. Today we'll do the migration strategy and approach from SAP PO to SAP CI, and we'll start with an introduction of the company. We'll share the agenda. So, we do today with a couple of colleagues. We will present the migration approach and demo the solution that we have. And the presenters today will be Ashwini, Keith, Martin, and myself. And we're gonna take roughly about an hour to go through the content and to present the solution. So first of all, as a company, who we are, for those of you that don't know Rojo, we're a software and a consultancy company. What we do, what you see here on the right-hand side, as a company, we'll have on the top, we have two product lines. One is the enterprise integration and data analytics. So that's where we originate from. We build products around the integration domain, and once we've built these products, we've managed to take the data out and do some data analytics on top of these integrations. So on the bottom side, you see the people side of the business. So we have three lines of businesses. It's consultancy. So we have consultants working on enterprise integration and data analytics. We build the software. That's the innovation part of the company. And we have the managed services. So those are the lines of business that we have and the products that we have as Rojo. Okay, go to that. What makes us relevant in this PO to CI migration is that what you see here are the books, which are the official training guides by SAP, which have been written and co-written by our colleagues from Rojo. So basically, you see here about 20 years of knowledge in 4 books, and we have a deep expertise in PO and a very deep expertise in cloud integration. So day in, day out, we work with customers on these topics and help them out implement these technologies. In this case, also migrate away from process orchestration to CI. So that's in a really short intro who we are as a company. So we would like now to move on to a poll. Previously to starting the webinar and the content. So we first take a poll, 2 questions, and then afterwards we'll get into the content. Martin, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Hugo. Thank you for the nice intro and for kicking off the webinar. As Hugo mentioned, before we make the deep dive into the topic of the migration, we have 2 questions prepared here for the audience. I will now launch the polls. You have about a minute or so to answer the question. Basically, this would help us to understand at what stage you are currently in your migration journey from moving from PO to CI, and also what are you most interested in. This would help us to tailor basically partially the webinar towards what is most interesting for the audience here. So you can see that, the first poll is now live. Feel free to leave your answers. And I will also now launch the second question, which is about what you are most interested in, whether it's the strategy, some advice on running the PO assessment, Rojo's migration service that we will also see in action a bit later on, or more about some best practices related to SAP CPI. Okay, we see some answers starting to come in. And we see that most of the people are either in the planning stage or considering the SAP PO assessment. So I think this is quite good, as we'll provide quite some interesting information around specifically those stages. And we also see that Rojo's migration service is something that most of you are interested in. give it 15 to 20 more seconds before we close the PO, and we proceed with the deep dive into the topic. Okay, I will proceed to close the poll. Thank you for participating, and I think we can move further.
Yep. Thank you, Martin. Thanks for the introduction, Hugo. Now we can get started with the content. But before we get into the content, I think it's important to discuss why we have to plan for migration. Why is it important to strategize migration at this stage? So it's quite some time. SAP has announced the end of maintenance for SAP Process Orchestration, and for every customer who is using SAP PO, it will be sooner or later they have to start thinking about moving to SAP Integration Suite, which is the future of integration for SAP landscape, and that's where this migration approach comes into picture. So for customers, when they are moving from PO to CI, the migration journey can be divided into three stages mainly. The first stage has to start with the assessment stage, where um, what we do mainly is we analyze our PO landscape. And when we say analyze, what we mean is that we try to have an overview. What are the different types of interfaces do we have, different patterns? What are the different types of adapters we are using? How many artifacts we have to move to CI? What is the pattern we are going to follow in our SAP Cloud integration within Integration Suite? So there are different aspects of assessment which we need to take care in this stage. And on the basis of this assessment, we strategize, we plan our migration, we prepare for our migration. And then once we have this clarity, the execution of a migration is possible, where we start moving the artifacts from our PO system to SAP CI, and we test them. And then we are ready to basically move the interface or switch over to SAP CI. All these stages, there are different aspects which we have to think about. And this is what we are going to share the experience from our existing implementation or migration, which we have done with other customers. So if we get to, or if we zoom in the assessment phase, I think, which is our next slide here. This is about the assessment which we get from SAP tool. So it's good to know for customers that we do have an offering from SAP within Integration Suite, which helps in the assessment as well in the migration. When we talk about standard assessment, there are different types of summary which we get out of that standard assessment, which is within Integration Suite. So one is the different categorization of interfaces, which basically categorize if your interface is ready to migrate, if it requires some adjustment, if there is an evaluation required, which you see in this circle here with the three different colors. It also gives you the summary of different types of adapters which is used in your landscape, different types of scenarios, or let's say complexity which you have in your interfaces. But if we focus on this assessment category, this is a very key aspect for any customer. Why? Because it basically gives you an overview of what are the interfaces where you need to focus, what are the interfaces where you would need less efforts. So if we take example of each type of category here, to start with ready to migrate, what does it mean? By what the name it suggests is basically you have a pattern or equivalent pattern in SAP CI of that in SAP PO. So you can move your artifacts from SAP PO to SAP CI with bare minimum efforts. When it comes to adjustment required, what it means is that you have to do some adjustments before you can move it to SAP Cloud integration. If I can give some examples here, it would be, say, for example, most of the customers have file adapter, right? And many times we use file content conversion. So when it comes to FCC or content conversion, it is not directly supported in SAP CI point to point. So there we need to adjust and handle how we are going to handle it in SAP CI, and it requires some extra efforts there. Another example could be function libraries. So for function libraries, though they can be migrated, but we need to follow a specific sequence when we are handling these interfaces where we have function libraries. Other aspect could be dynamic configuration, which we have. So this is where we need to adjust our PO interfaces before we can migrate them. Third example of evaluation required, third category, is basically where we need to put quite some efforts because either there is some adapter module which we have developed or using and is not supported in SAP CI. So we cannot migrate adapter modules pretty much. Another example could be Java mapping, where Java mapping cannot be migrated to CI. So we need to see how we automate that part or how we handle the migration of Java mappings. So what you see here is basically depending upon the type of category the interface belongs to, we need to take some specific actions. And this assessment basically helps in planning those actions for us. So if I have to zoom in a further or ask a question here, is this assessment enough for us? Do we need further assessment or not? And this is exactly where we are trying to help our customers. So with this, I can go to the next slide. And the first part here is the assessment part, which we want to focus on further. So with the SAP assessment, what we were able to answer is that what can be migrated from PO to CI. But at the same time, it is also important to answer what should be migrated to CI, how it should be migrated to CI. What that means is basically that when we have interfaces which are deprecated or which should be deprecated because they were not used in production, if there is some mismatch between the landscapes of SAP PO environment, if there are scenarios if we are migrating to CI and we don't have exact functionalities which are covered in PO, how do we enhance them? So basically, how do we enhance our existing interfaces while moving to CI so that we cover all the functionalities? One example here could be reprocessing of messages, which was there in SAP PO, but in SAP CI, we don't have that functionality. So how do we handle that? And this is something which we'll be also showcasing in our demo, which will be done by my colleague Ashwini in coming slides. So with this assessment of SAP tool and with the help of the second level of assessment, what we are able to do, we are able to plan things and prepare the migration steps for us, which is basically the next steps. So which high level is about setting up the right governance for CI, since it is a new tool which we are adding in our landscape. So we have to have the right governance there. We have to have the right or we have to introduce the right integration patterns which we will follow. And when we do so, it can also mean that we will have to enhance our integrations depending upon these governance and these integration patterns. An example could be for IDOC, where we say, okay, for IDOC scenarios, we will always have an event broker in between. So, and why we will have this, we will discuss more about this in our next slide. For one of our customers, we have redesigned all the IDOC scenarios. And why we did that, we can also highlight that. Following that, we have migrate step, where once we have done the planning, we start migrating these interfaces, and where SAP does offer a tool to support the migration of artifacts from PO to CI. So which I think we will show in our demo, which can give you an overview of how on top of this migrate, we still need to take some actions, because when SAP says ready to migrate, it doesn't mean it is ready to use, right? Why it is not ready to use? Because of several factors. Few of those factors could be where we need to handle the exceptions, because when we migrate the interfaces from PO to CI, we don't have exception handling there. We need to add that. Otherwise, our interfaces will fail without any proper exception handling. We don't have security artifact which is handled there. We don't have value mapping which is migrated for a specific scenarios. So all these aspects has to be taken care of while we are once we have migrated them. And once we cover all these aspects of enhancements, we can actually deploy them and test these interfaces, which is the last stage of this whole migration journey. So the enhanced part is the part where Rojo, on the basis of experience with different customers during the migration, we have tried to automate these parts to avoid all the manual steps. And that is what my colleague Ashwini will showcase in the demo. So this is summary of different stages and their key aspect which we need to take into account. And if I move to the second slide, the example which I was highlighting about, it's one of the customer based out of Netherlands, is Heineken, where we did the migration, and it's still in process. But the key aspect was there: how did we design or redesign the IDOC interfaces? So if we take a very basic example where we had a IDOC interface which was moving coming from SAP and going to Salesforce. If we migrate it to SAP CI, it will look something like this, how we have highlighted here, right? But the question here comes is, are we covering all the functionalities if we move just one to one here? The answer is not, we don't cover all the functionalities. Why is that? Because we are missing the functionality of reprocessing. We are missing the functionality of how we are able to handle the load since it is a cloud system now. So there, if we introduce an event broker in between, then we can basically decouple the systems, and it will allow also us to reprocess the messages in a better way, and we can handle the much load in a much better way and scale it. And it also gives the advantage that we can add new consumers to this event broker when for the same IDOC when it is coming from SAP. So we don't need to build interfaces again and again. It's almost adding like a new subscriber to it. And this can be done by automation. So we don't need to do it manually, adding an event broker. And this event broker can be anything. It can be SAP Event Mesh, Solace, or anything else. And this is what is an example how we are trying to handle the migration using the SAP standard tool and also adding the enhancements via automation to meet the best practices of SAP CI, to use the capabilities of SAP CI. So with this, I think I will hand it over to my colleague Ashwini for the demo part, where she can actually walk you through the stages and also show you the actual tool which is available from SAP for migration. So Ashwini.
Thank you,
So
Ankit.
I will stop my screen sharing also. You can take it over.
Yeah, I'll share. Yep. So thank you, Ankit, for giving all the insights of how the migration, what are the steps involved there. And if you think about any customer, if whoever are planning for the migration from PO to CI, we have to think about how the migration tool works, which is provided by SAP. Are there any manual steps involved, and can we automate them? Here is where so before going to the actual demo, I will just give the capabilities of integration suite. So integration suite is a iPaaS solution provided by SAP, which will solve all your SAP to non-SAP integrations, and it's a part of BTP. And the capabilities of integration suite are these. Like the first is CI. This is the successor of PO. It is the main part for PO to CI migration. Manage APIs, which is the API management, then manage trading partner, where it plays an important role for the B2B integrations. And if you think about the mappings, it is a centralized place which where it is for integration advisor. And when we talk about the non-CPA connectivity, we have open connectors. And one more is the access migration scenarios, which plays an important role for the migration of PO to CI. So in this demo, we will look into the CI part and the SS migration scenario. So let me go into this. This is the where we can connect to our PO system. We can extract all the information and get a report out of it. So this is a SAP provided tool where we have this data extraction and scenario evaluation. So here I can give you an example. we have connected to one of the PO system, and report of the extraction will look like this. It will extract all your ICOs, your operation mapping, service interface. Basically, all your PO objects will be extracted in this request. And once it is extracted, you have to run another request for scenario evaluation, where you will get a report. And if you see here, based on the report, we will know how many interfaces or scenarios are there in your PO landscape, and out of which, how many are the categories which Ankit showed, that ready to migrate, the adjustment required, or evaluation required. We can see the number of interfaces which falls into those categories. And also for each category, will get about the effort estimation, whether teacher size basically, and small, medium, or large, based on the scenario evaluation. And also we get a report of what all adapters are involved in sender and the receiver side. So we get all the list of adapters for the sender and receiver. And this is where you have to think about the report, because there are quite a few adapters which are not supported in CI. So you have to think about them, how to handle or how to redesign it, or what do we have to do of those interfaces. And also, along with these overview, for each interface of PO, you will get a assessment category, which ready to migrate or adjustment required or evaluation required. So even though the report provides you the information about adapter use or the assessment category, obviously you have to think about it. For example, PO being on-prem and CI is on cloud. So there can be the best practices or naming convention would be different for PO and CI. This is where you have to think about whether interfaces, whichever are there in PO, are they actually required to be migrated to CI, or do we have to discard it, or do we have to redesign in a better way? So all these questions will have to be answered during the planning phase before you start the migration. Even though the report provides you the category, but you have to think about it basically. And so Rojo's app is there, which is built on top of the SAP provided tool, where you can see here we have different environments like development, quality, acceptance, and production. And we have different objects of PO, like parties or business systems or communication channel, configuration scenario. So this app provides you a dashboard where you see how many, whether your whether your systems are in sync or are they out of sync. So based on the values, you can see whether you have to, which environment will be your source of truth. Whether if you have any extra interfaces in development, so you don't have to transport or migrate it to CI. And also you get an overview of interfaces which are not been executed for maybe 1 or 2 years. Then that is the point which you have to think whether those interfaces are required to be transported to CI or not, or do we have to discard them. So these all questions you have to answer before you start the actual migration. And going into a demo, so I'll this is one of the interface of PO, where we have SAP system as a source, and we have target as file server, where we have an operation mapping. And if you see here in the operation mapping, we have imported parameters, which is parameterized mapping, and receiver is also a file. So this is one of the scenario. We'll see how migration works from PO to CI. So I'll just go here. Now, when we go to CI, the first part, which is the package. So package is nothing but a folder, or you can consider where you store all the I flows inside it. And this also is one of the question, because before starting the migration, you need package to be created. And this might be a question based on each customer. How do we define the package? It can be based on configuration scenario of PO, or it can be based on some system specific or some pattern. So this is has to be decided before you start the migration. So for demo purpose, I have taken one of the package. Here we have an option of migrate, where we will select the PO system. So in this case, this is one of our PO system which we are connecting. After selecting it, we'll click on next. Here you see all the ICO details which are present in the PO system. So for demo purpose, I've taken this one, stock transfer. I select the ICO and click on next step. Here, SAP has provided quite a few templates based on your ICO. It will give you options of selecting the patterns. So in this case, it's a point-to-point synchronous interface with one sender, one receiver, and one message mapping. But in your case, it will be different patterns which will be provided by SAP. So you have to select the pattern which you have to migrate. And then there are options of coupling with the JMS or process at receiver side. For demo purpose, I'm not selecting it, but in your case, you can also go for these options. So after selecting next, we get the option of message mapping from ESR. So this is where it fetches all your mappings from the ESR. Here we get the option of whether we have to select the message mapping in the iFlow itself as a local inside your flow, or you can also make it as a reusable component where it will import your mapping in the package and then reuse in your iFlows. So in this demo, obviously I have one mapping which is not reusable. It's local to the integration flow. So I'm just disabling this and clicking on next, and we have to give a name of the um, iFlow which you have to import. And I'll click on review, and you can here you get all the details which you have selected. After reviewing it, just click on migrate. You can view the artifact. Yeah. So this is the iFlow which got migrated based on our scenario. If you see, it is still having some issues. Example, the first one, here you see adapter, it is showing cross. And now if you see on the connection details, you see the credential name is not defined here. All the other details are imported, but credential is not. So this is where it plays an important role, where what automation we have done. So all the whenever you migrate scenario interface from PO to CI, everywhere credentials are common. Every channel will have the credential, but it is not getting migrated by the SAP provided tool. Then if you see the component names, it is having business component underscore SAP or business component underscore receiver. So as PO work and CI work, it is different way. So in PO, we had SLD where we have business component, business systems, or parties. But in CI, we don't have such SLD or any common place where we map those changes. So here, this naming also we have to think around how to keep it. Whether obviously in your PO environment, in dev also it can have dev underscore SAP. So we have to think about whether we have to keep dev underscore SAP till production, or how do we automate it. Also, if you see here, exceptions of process, it is just adding a error start and error end. There's nothing block or nothing is done after the error. So this is where we have to handle whether how what to do about the exceptions, whether we have to send an email or a common iFlow where we have to send the data. Something we have to do about the exceptions of process because it is not handled by the SAP provided migration tool. And also, as we have seen, the mapping was a parameterized mapping. And here we see the resource is not even added. So for parameters mapping, as it is not supported by SAP tool, it is not even giving you a mapping or importing a mapping for you. It is just adding a block. That's it. So based on this, what Rojo gives is the migration assessment tool, which works on about the SAP provided report. So if you see here, these are the ICOs of PO, where you have the sender component, service interface, your namespace, and this is the classification which is coming from your report. So SAP, whatever we ran the report, right? The classification, ready to migrate, evaluation, or adjustment required. This is the classification which is coming from that report. And status is where you have imported the ICO in CI or not. Based on that, it is not imported or imported. So now we'll go into the our interface or ICO. So this is the ICO which we migrated from PO to CI. So if you see, the equivalent flow is coming this, which we had given in the name of the uh, iFlow when we imported it, migrated it. So these are uh, buttons which are provided by Rojo, which will solve all your many of your problems to expedite your migration journey. So if you think whatever was not migrated by SAP tool, we are providing a buttons here which will help you out to solve that issue. The first is rename artifacts, which basically what we discussed, right? The business component name or the iFlow name. Obviously, it is not according to the naming convention for any project. So every customer will have their own naming convention which they follow based on the governance or whatever they have set it up. So based on that, we have to rename the iFlows whenever we migrate. So here, once it renames it, obviously there would be, we can see here the differences what, because whenever we migrate, it is a common name which we will give, but it's not according to the naming convention. So now I get a response that iFlow name is this. So if I go to the iFlow and refresh it, I should see the new name here for the iFlow. Yeah. So this is what is not as a constant, but it is according to one of the naming convention. This is customizable based on each customer, what we have to keep. But for now, we have kept it gives a interface ID, it gives a sender, it gives a receiver, and what about the description of the interface? So this can also be customized according to different customers. And the business component, now you see it is renamed. It has removed the business component. So it has renamed all the sender and receiver involved in the iFlow. So if you think you have 1,000 interfaces, to rename an artifact, it would be very difficult to set what is the naming convention and change it for each and every iFlow. So this buttons helps you a lot and solves your problem. Now, if you see the exception which we discussed, it is just having a start and an end in between. So it is not doing anything. So in a customer, obviously uh, there would be a requirement where to you have to send an email or you have to send it to one of the event broker, or depends on each and every customer. So here, after clicking this, if you see, it gives a response that exception is added. Let's refresh and check. So in this case, we have added a exception subprocess block where we will call a common iFlow, child iFlow, common exception handling, where you can do anything like you can send an email or whatever you want to do. We'll do it in a common iFlow, and every no parent iFlows will just have this exception sub-process handled, so that we handle the exceptions. It's not just it's even not captured by the SAP tool. Then we have the credentials where you see the cross buttons. We have an option of create and configure credentials. So I'll just click on this, and PO, obviously the credentials were maintained in the channel itself, but it is not how the CI works. So here, after clicking this, you can see I got a response that credentials are created and configured. So here, if I refresh, you see there's no error in here. So if I click on configure for both this FTP, I can see credential name here configured. It is configured. It's not a constant. So you can change it in higher environments if you want. And I'll just go to because CI, we have to create the credentials and manage security. This is how, and then it gets configured in channel. This is how it works in CI as compared to PO. So if I go to manage security material, I can see this user created and also with the technical user, if you see this, the deployment and created just now. So this button solves all many of your problem where you have thousands of interfaces and you have to configure every credential. You have to maintain the credential and then configure in your iFlows. So we also have an option of deploying iFlow, and once you click, it will deploy your iFlow, and then you are ready to test your iFlow. But in this case, as we have mapping and it is not supported by SAP, so we'll just try to see how this migrate parameters mapping work. So in this case, if you have a parameters mapping, it is not even providing your mapping for that matter. It is not even importing the mapping for you. Now, and if you think about to solve this issue, we will have to define those parameters somewhere in the iFlow, then use it, edit your mapping, assign it to your mapping. So in this case, when we clicked on this, it did something. I'll just refresh and see how it works. If you see, a mapping is imported. And if I open this and see the mapping, it has created a properties outside in the iFlow, and it has called and provided in the target. And also we see there's a value mapping as well. So this is how it works. And these parameters are defined in the content modifier here, property. So these values are also configurable. These are not constant. So these values will also get changed if you want. These are the external parameters. So just clicking a button, it actually imported your mapping, also created a content modifier with all the details and used as a Groovy script in your mapping to refer that. So this solved our parameters mapping. But as we see here at the bottom, these were the parameters which we have already seen that it got imported in the iFlow. And we also see if there are value mappings also in the same icon. So if I click on migrate value mappings, CP also does not support the migration of value mapping. So if you have 500 value mappings in your PO uh, landscape, you have to create the value mapping in CI manually for each and every value mapping and also provide all the values based on that. But in here, we have provided the option of migrate value mapping where it migrates. So if you see, I got a response of value mappings are migrated. And if I go to the package here, and try to search for a value mapping, I see there are two value mappings which are imported here. They are created just now with the technical user. And if I go inside it, I can see all the agency identifier, it's a country code. So I can also see all the values getting migrated automatically. So if you think about creating it manually, it would be there can be a chance of missing the values because every value mapping can have very vast amount of values. So in this case, also it is having 1520. So that miss or the manual issues can also be solved with this. And also we have add end-to-end monitoring, where if you think if we have to track from sender to receiver, if we have to add a tool in between like Splunk or data log, or depends on external tool, if you have to send the logs to them, it is possible here. And also we have option of enable EDA pattern, where if, as Ankit mentioned, that EDA solves a lot of problem for specifically for IDOC scenarios. So if you want to enable the EDA pattern for any of your ICO or iFlow for that matter, then this option is also available here. Considering the time, I won't go into the demo of these 2 points, but we can surely share it in the next webinars. And I would like to hand over to Ankit for discussing more about the things which we have to consider for during the migration.
Thank you, Ashwini, for this demo and detail about the standard assessment and the automations which we have worked on top of this uh, standard tool available from SAP. So if I share my screen back, then we can go into further things which we need to take into account on top of this automation. So let me start sharing my screen again. Yes. So we just had a demo of PO to CI migration service offering from Rojo. How do we do the standard assessment on top of what are the automation which we need, um, and how we do them. And then this is not the only topics we need to take care about. There are further challenges, if I can say that, which we need to be mindful about when it comes to PO to CI migration. And if I can highlight few of them further, uh, one would be adapters. So there are few adapters which are not natively supported by SAP CI or functionalities of those adapters, which is there in SAP PO. So what that would mean is for us to plan how we are going to handle those integrations, how we are going to redesign them, or if we can leverage automation to some extent to handle this scenario, to avoid all the manual steps. If we are using adapter modules in our channels, custom adapter modules, how we are going to move those adapter modules in SAP CI. If we have Java mapping, so Java mappings are not supported in SAP CI, how can we use the code and move it to CI without redeveloping all those codes in the format of Groovy scripts or something? Can there be a smarter way of converting them in Groovy scripts via automation? So, and one example which Ashwini already showed is message mapping, where if we have parameters or if we have, say, for example, dynamic configurations also, for those we have faced these challenges with our existing implementations, and we have tried to solve them. So instead of doing it manually, we are trying to use automation as much as possible. One, to avoid the manual interventions and to expedite the time of execution. So where we say, okay, it was taking us almost 1 month to migrate this interfaces manually. If we have 1,000 interfaces, how can we reduce into 10 days? Uh, so this is the aspect or approach which we are trying to help our customers with. Yeah, B2B also scenarios where we need to think about, do we have all the adapters in CI, which was there in our SAP PO landscape for our B2B integrations. And there is a different service offering also from SAP for B2B integrations. So we need to think about which service offering within the BTP platform or integration suite is right for our requirement. Is it event mesh? Is it B2B integration? Is it APIs which we need to expose instead of how we were traditionally doing it in SAP PO? So these are the points which we need to take into account when we do the assessment and we plan for our migration and how we can have automation in our execution phase. So moving to the other slide. As you know, and Hugo also highlighted that we also have a software department where we develop softwares. So one of the softwares in parallel to the service offering, which we just explained, is SAP CI app on Splunk. So what it does, it helps to monitor the design time environment and runtime environment of SAP CI in a much better way. And why is it important? Because once we move to SAP CI, we need to ensure our investment, what we have done on our new house, if I would say that. And by that, if I give an example here, in PO, how we manage security artifacts is very different how we manage it in CI. In CI, we reuse the security artifacts. But the problem there comes is if I have to know one of my security artifact is in 100 interfaces, which are those 100 interfaces? I cannot do that in my current CI. I have to open every interface, find out the channel name, security artifact name, and then see if it is reused or not. But with these tools, we have solved this problem for developers, for operations. And this is one of the tools which is used by many of our customers also, in addition to this. But if you want to know more about this tool, feel free to contact. I think my colleague will share the information how you can reach out to us if you want to know more about these solutions. And moving ahead, so this is also a glimpse of the offering which we have, which creates this overview of different components which is involved, different types of adapters used, in which scenarios it are used. So there are a lot of details which is there, which is this tool has to offer. And moving ahead, to summarize the session, what are the key takeaways? The main key takeaways would be for the customers who are using SAP PO that SAP has announced end of maintenance for SAP PO, and there are no new investment coming along for PO. So all the new features, functionalities is developed in SAP Integration Suite. So one important thing for customers is to not develop anything new in SAP PO, stop the development, plan the migration as soon as possible to secure the investment there. And how we can leverage SAP tool to start with the assessment, and how Rojo also helps in that process, and how we need to do the second level of assessment to further secure our migration from PO to CI. And then when it comes to the execution part of it, how we can leverage the automation as much as possible instead of doing it whole task manually, which can take almost 2 to 3 years if we have big number of interfaces. So these are the key takeaways of this session. And then with this, I will hand it over to my colleague Hugo back, where he can tell more about how you can reach out to us, how we can have a pre-session with you guys. So over to you, Hugo.
Yeah, thanks, Ankit. So indeed, so what we've shown now here is what we also in the introduction already shared. So we have all the expertise on PO and CI, and we do data analytics. And what you've seen here today was a combination of these two things. So thanks, Ashwini and Ankit for presenting this. So we could imagine that with not migrating PO every day to CI and introducing new technologies like event-driven, you might have some specific questions related to your own situation, your own company. So if you would like to discuss in further detail your particular situation, please reach out to us and talk to one of our experts. And you can contact us at hello@rojoconsultancy.com. So that's also available. And then we're nearing the end of the webinar. There's a couple of questions that came in. One of them was on a question on how are other companies doing this migration, and meaning like what support did they get from Rojo and what type of challenges were they facing? So maybe Ankit, if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yes, Hugo. So I think before there was one aspect of the similar question was that how we are handling this for one of the customers, and where I highlighted the IDOC scenario. So maybe I can zoom in there a bit.
Yeah.
So as a part of the stages which we explained, we did a detailed assessment together with them, where we identified all the problems which we could have, or the challenges which we could have when we move to SAP CI. And one major challenge was this reprocessing functionality, which was there in PO, but is not there in SAP CI. So as a pattern, and as a part of governance also, when we introduced SAP CI in the landscape, we definitely defined all the governance aspect, and a part of that was setting up the patterns which we should follow in CI. So it's not like that we just move things as it is. And many customers are doing this, following this pattern where they are not just moving things from their old house to new house. They are checking the requirement, what should be moving things and how we should be moving things. And there it was identified that it makes sense to have an event broker in between, because this is also one of the best practices. Now SAP is trying to have events and APIs for as much as business object available there. So it was introduced that, okay, we will have event broker for all the interfaces wherever we need this reprocessing functionalities, and where we see that the same message can be used by multiple consumers. And IDOC also was in that category, and where then what we decided, okay, we will introduce an event broker here. In one customer, it was Sole, say, for example, and a similar scenario was with other customer where we used SAP Advanced Event Mesh. So it can be different things, but the idea is pretty much same. How do we ensure what we are moving to CI is using the capabilities of CI? And it's not just trying to move one thing from legacy system to a new system. And that's where we also try to do this via automation, so that we use SAP tool to move things first, and then on top of it, we run our automation to convert them or enable the EDA of the solution of the interfaces. So instead of doing it manually per interface, it was more of an automation which we try to leverage. Yeah, this is, I would summarize it like this.
Perfect. Thanks,
Yeah.
Ankit. Then so another question came in. Maybe could you elaborate on that one as well, or is it?
I cannot see the question right now, so yeah.
Question is, do you also happen to have an automated solution for the use of dynamic configuration in your apps?
Yes. So I can answer it a bit differently. I think we have to look at the problem of one is the UDF and also the dynamic configurations here. So one demo which Ashwini showed was related to parameterized mapping, right? So there, how we are handling the parameters of message mapping. So there is no straightforward solution to start with, and SAP migration tool is not covering it. But at the same time, we have options where we can use leverage APIs and do this automation where we can read the artifact information from PO, enhance our IE flows or interfaces in CI, and have the same functionality what we had in PO. So the answer would be yes. Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the other one is about like will the recording be uploaded and shared? Yes, it will be. So it will shared be shared with the attendees. And maybe we've addressed the question maybe in the chat as well. But how can we get started with the assessment, and do we need to buy the SAP license? So I think we've
yes. Yeah. Yes. So I think it's also many customers are evaluating right now. How do we get started? Right. Pretty much that's the question here. So for that, I think there are a few options available. One is definitely we don't need to buy SAP license to get started with this migration journey, because the first part is doing the assessment, and for that we can leverage a trial license also to the standard assessment. It requires very basic setup of cloud connector and connecting your PO system, and you can already get a report out of it, which will give you an idea of how much gap do you have right now, how much effort is needed, high level. Definitely you require a detailed assessment further to properly plan your migration. And this is where also Rojo can help you, even for the standard assessment. So Rojo can also offer a tenant if needed for doing the standard assessment. So which we have done for other customers also.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
And with that, we've gone through all the questions. So we put on the next slide. So as you've seen in the presentation, moving from PO to CI brings also the opportunity to leverage new technologies. So there is upcoming webinars on the 12th of June. It's on event-driven architecture, and basically the idea is that the iPaaS is an enabler for event-driven integrations. So we'll talk about that and also present a couple of customer use cases where we've implemented these within our consultancy practice. And the other one is the end-to-end monitoring. It's part of what you've seen partially today on the monitors that we use to get information out of PO and CI. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attendance. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us on hello@rojoconsultancy.com. And again, thanks for taking the time today and join us on this webinar, and have a good day, evening, or morning, wherever you joined from. Thanks.